Hi, I'm J.R. Fibonacci. This is for those who argue over the existence of language, God, and/or atheism. Does language exist? Sure, we can perceive patterns. So we know that perceiving exists, and we know patterns of perceiving exist. But what about language? Does it exist or not? For those of us who can only hear, who can not only hear, but are also fluent in a particular language being spoken, we can perceive patterns of sounds and interpret them into words, and then into sequences of words that produce stimulations of things like neurons, and that triggers memories and comprehension, possibly. We can label all of that process as language. For those of us who can not only see but can also read, right? Okay, not write like write, but correct. Never mind. We can perceive patterns of shapes. Got to do it closer to the camera here if I'm going to do a thing. Okay, we can perceive patterns of shapes and interpret them into letters. And make words out of them. So then we can label that literacy because it's written and stuff. That means if it's written down, it's literacy. And that's also language, but literacy is a huge technological advance over spoken language. Right? Okay? Right? We can count all numeric symbols as literacy. And we can name all written symbols to also be a part of literacy. Like, here, let me write a symbol real quick. This is really important, so wait, just wait. It's really important. Okay, here's a symbol. Dang it, I ripped the paper, man. Just hold on. Okay, that is a symbol right there. That's a symbol. It's clearly it's a circle with an arrow pointing out of it. That's what it is. That's the symbol. So now you know. So that would be an instance of literacy. If you know what that symbol represents. If you don't see it as just a circle with an arrow or whatever, even if you do see it as a circle with an arrow, that's pretty cool. But you might see that as the astrological symbol for Mars, or you might see that as the symbol for males, like a particular half of humanity and a particular half of most any animal kingdom has males as distinct from females. But that's often a symbol that would be put on the door of a toilet kind of restroom kind of place for people to rest. All right, so that's a kind of literacy. And it doesn't involve spoken language. It's written. It's like a symbolic shape of stuff. And that's language. It's pretty cool. We can even include in our definition of language things like physical gestures. Things like physical gestures such as waving or nodding or expressions on the face, or complex things like the signals that officials in sporting events use. Personal foul, roughing the kicker, or whatever, right? Okay, right? So all of that stuff is like, that's language. So people can argue over the existence of that stuff if they want, like if they're really bored, I guess. I don't know, you tell me if you've done it. I've probably done it. I just don't remember why. Anyway, so for sake of argument, let's just imagine, at least for a moment, that there is such a thing as language, or at least there could be. Now, what would be some of its attributes? What would be some of the qualities that we would use to distinguish language from, I don't know, whatever we would distinguish it from? Well, language, is it an individuality? Is it like is it an individuality as in a person or isolated organism? Language is clearly not exclusive to any specific individual or organism. We can call language transpersonal or impersonal or just non-personal because it's not about persona and personality. That's not really what language is about. All of that stuff, persona, personality, identity, that all arises in language. Those are like the branches of the tree of language and stuff, but language is like the root or the trunk or the branches. You know what? The whole tree is the tree, whether it's the root or the branches or the trunk, right? Right? So language isn't specific to any particular organism. It's not exclusive to any particular individual. We just call it transpersonal, impersonal, non-personal, whatever. Next distinction, next quality, attribute of language. Is language temporary? Well, language is the source of all units of time, like hours, seconds, years, decades. Those are all just things in language. So we could even say that language is beyond time, the source of time, and was prior to time. We could say that language is eternal, that language is both the beginning and the end, that before any particular identifying in language existed, like of any specific organism or individuality or person, right, like such as Abraham, language is already present. Before Abraham was, language is present, like the language of I am or Yahweh or Yeshua or Hebrew or Greek or Latin or English, okay? So we could say that language is the root of all identifying and all identities. We could say that. I mean, it's possible. So we could say that language is the source of all linguistic events or processes, such as communication or interpretation or translation. I was trying to think of if I knew the word translation in any other language, and I just don't really know any other languages. Like, I know karate and enchilada, but that really doesn't count as knowing, you know, Japanese or Spanish, right? So, translation, that was the word I was looking for. So, those are just events in language or between languages, but languages are each instances of language, right? Each language, like Greek or English or Spanish or Japanese, those are all instances of language. So we could make lots of comments about language. I could go on and on about it. Really, I could. In fact, I've been doing it for a long time. A lot of what I've been talking about all along here in like the last few years, I mean, is language. All of the comments would be instances of language already. Anything I would have to say or you might say about language, it would already be instances of language. We might even say that if you're clear about the foundation of what language is, then all the rest is mere commentary. Now, if you happen to be familiar with certain linguistic constructions, that are popular within a branch of a language called Christianity, within that branch of language called Christianity, then if you're familiar with certain linguistic constructions within that branch of language called Christianity, then you may recognize how many of the above references, the prior references that I just made a minute ago, were references to the ancient spiritual texts of Christianity, Judaism, and even Hinduism and so on. So with that in mind, consider the following scenario. Okay, you ready? Okay, you ready? Okay. Once upon a time, a long time ago in a distant land, Honolulu, I think was the name of it. There once lived a man named Santa Claus who talked a lot about a great secret. It was great. It was good news, great secret, that kind of thing. So certain people understood some of what he said, and a few people understood a lot of what he said. But he was basically considered to be very weird and unusual and odd and abnormal. So he, like Jim Carrey or something, right? So he occasionally said really bizarre things like, knowing the great secret is the most important thing that you could ever do. So do it first, okay? And here are some of the infinite qualities of the great secret, but these are only a few of them, okay? Ready? First, the great secret is eternal, okay? When the first distinctions in language were made, that was the distinction between heaven and earth, okay? Heaven and earth were separated from each other in language, right? And when those first distinctions in language were made between heaven and earth, okay, the great secret was already there. And the great secret was the process by which the first distinctions in language were made. For the distinctions of language are language. Distinctions in language are language. And of course, language is in them, and they are in it. Those distinctions are in language. By the way, language is the great secret, and it's not really all that secret because everybody knows about language pretty much. Do you? You already know about? You've heard of it? Okay, cool. So, right. So it's not really all that secret. It's possibly not really all that great, actually, of a secret because you may already know. But I had to say something to get your attention, and if I have your attention now, then whatever I said before worked to get you to hear now, right? Okay? So anyway, the great secret is not just an individual, but it is within every individual, just as within every branch is the tree of the life, which gives life to the branches of the tree, right? So language is like, whenever there's identifying of an individual going on by an individual, well, that's an instance of language. I don't know the American Sign Language word for language, or the hand sign, the gesture thing. I'm not fluent. All right, so Santa Claus said all that because that's the kind of thing he would say. It was really weird, like I told you. So, further, when you recognize the fundamental authority of the great secret of language, then any secondary authorities or instructions will instantly be recognized as merely formations in language, formations of language, by language, and for language. So then any secondary or instructions or authorities will be recognized as the thing I just said. Merely formations of language, in language, for language, by language, all that. Okay, so that is the great secret. Language, that's the great secret. Now you know the great secret. You're in on it, okay? Don't tell anybody, it's a secret. So, any formations in language are not themselves the great secret, though. See, the great secret is language. And you can't really even say, you say the great secret, but that's just some words, right? So, any formations in language are not themselves the great secret itself, okay? Anything that can be spoken of, anything that can be spoken is not the great secret. It's a evidence of the great secret. It's an example of the great secret, but it's not the actual, great secret. Anyway, I like to call it the Tao, T-A-O, because I'm Chinese, because, that's like traditional for Santa Claus. He's Chinese. I don't know if you knew that. Anyway, so now all of that, when Santa Claus told them all this stuff, so check it out. So Santa Claus, a long time ago, he said all that to people, and all of that was very strange and intriguing to some folks, but they weren't sure what to make of it, really. So they talked about what Santa Claus had said, and then perhaps only a few decades later, they wrote down their best recollections of what he had said, plus some of their own commentaries and their letters to each other, because they knew that they were right. Okay? And they called themselves titles like apostles and prophets and Christians. And they collected their various written records into scrolls and books and CDs and LP albums later. And they called them things like the Bible and Torah and Talmud and Gitas and Sutras and Taoist classics. So then along came a 4-year-old, sweet little girl, sat on Santa's lap, not that Santa, different Santa. And she came along and she was assigned by some king with the task of making a single authorized translations of all of those ancient writings into the English language from the Greek language. Now, she actually wasn't Greek, by the way, but she insisted that she was a very big girl now that she was this many years old, okay? And she asserted that she was very smart, and of course she could make an excellent and complete translation of these books. It's not like they were something obscure and subtle, like algebra or biochemistry or mythical archetypes of psychological astrotheology, right? Like the 12 different, qualities of developmental stages of, that's a different, sorry, I brought that up. Maseroth is not even a Hebrew word. It's just ignore that I said that. Okay, so anyway, she wrote, the 4-year-old, okay? She was very familiar with Santa Claus. She had read a book about him. And, the one she was translating, it was in Greek, and she didn't know Greek forever. But anyway, so she wrote a book about a category in language called logos. And she translated that word as word instead of as language or linguistics or the great secret. So then for hundreds or even thousands of years, lots of people worshiped the words that she wrote and completely missed the spirit of the original revelations. Ironically, a lot of what she wrote about was warnings about people worshiping specific words, idealisms and idolatries and that kind of stuff, and neglecting the spirit or value of the communication carried through the words, the sounds. See, because it's not the actual sounds, it's the message, it's the spirit, it's the whole, it's the, like the, what's the word for it? Anyway, so she liked to quote Isaiah, one of her favorite Old Testament prophets. The Lord says, "These people worship me with their mouths and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their hearts are from their father, the devil, and they know me not. If they knew me, they would recognize me and, do what I tell them. They would follow me. They would understand me. They would comprehend me." Like, do you follow what I'm saying? So, along came Matthew, who was like a friend of Santa Claus or whatever, and, one of the disciples, right? And Matthew said, quoting Isaiah, well, actually, he was quoting Santa, quoting Isaiah, and Matthew said, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Their hearts are like way in their chests, and their spirits are far from me. Their hearts are far from me. Their spirits are far from me. They don't know what I'm talking about. They say, "Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord," but they don't get it. Okay, they haven't got it. And then I go on in the blog. There's just like a bunch of scriptural quotations and stuff. Matthew, Mark, Romans, Hosea, Isaiah, Jonah, all the uhs. Hosea, Jonah, Isaiah, Colossians. I don't even know what that means. Isaiah, Ezekiel. Oh, there's a different one. Jeremiah, another one of the uhs. Jeremiah, and no, that's not. That was a joke. So now I've given you the distinction of what a joke is. So you know what a joke is. You know that the other things that aren't jokes are not jokes. Okay? Roughing the talking heads right there. That's all I'm saying. Roughing the talking heads. Here's my talking it's a head and it's talking. You don't get it? It's like this. Okay, it's one of those you had to be there. So look, if you don't get the figure of speech and you try and literally interpret, you can't literal interpretation. You can't literal interpretation because if it's an interpretation, it's not a literal. Okay, you can't interpret. And I did another video about that, but it's a big joke. Okay, and it's a great secret, so I can't tell you any more about it. Because anything that I would tell you about it isn't it.